Craig Morgan's world turns upside down as the Kobali research vessel materializes in Earth's orbit. The 28-year-old geneticist stands transfixed, watching live footage of humanity's first contact with an advanced alien race. His heart races with excitement and trepidation as he volunteers for the unprecedented scientific exchange program. Hours later, Craig finds himself aboard the alien ship, face to face with Zia, a female Kobali scientist. Her iridescent skin and large liquid eyes captivate him. She explains their dire situation. A reproductive crisis threatens the Kobali's very existence. Their hope lies in understanding human breeding methods. Craig nods, agreeing to assist. He follows Zia into the ship's sterile laboratory, unaware of the intensity awaiting him. The room hums with unfamiliar technology. Zia prepares a series of experiments designed to analyze human mating behaviors and physiological responses. As the tests begin, Craig's initial enthusiasm wanes. The procedures quickly escalate beyond his comfort zone. Zia's clinical approach leaves him feeling like a specimen under a microscope. Her probing questions and invasive techniques make Craig squirm. Electrodes attach to his skin, monitoring his vital signs. Zia's instruments collect genetic material, her touch clinical and impersonal. Craig's discomfort grows as the experiments intensify. He tries to focus on the greater good, on helping save an entire species, but the objectification gnaws at him. Suddenly, Craig notices a shift in Zia's demeanor. Her movements become erratic, her breathing labored. The scientist's usual detachment gives way to visible agitation. Her eyes dart around the room, pupils dilated. Alarm bells ring in Craig's mind. He realizes the exposure to human mating practices is having an unexpected effect on Kobali biology and psychology. Zia's hands tremble as she reaches for the next instrument. "We should take a break," Craig suggests, his voice betraying his nervousness. Zia ignores him, her focus singular and intense. She moves closer, her alien features contorted in a mix of confusion and arousal. Craig backs away, his heart pounding. "Stop," he says firmly, reaching for the electrodes. "This isn't safe anymore." But Zia grabs his wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. Her eyes lock onto his, filled with a primal hunger that sends chills down his spine. The situation spirals out of control as Zia's mental state deteriorates further. Craig finds himself trapped in an increasingly dangerous environment. The sterile lab now feels like a cage, with an unstable alien blocking his exit. As Zia advances, Craig realizes the true cost of this cultural exchange may be higher than anyone anticipated. His mind races, searching for a way to defuse the situation before it's too late. Craig's heart pounded as he struggled against Zia's iron grip. Her alien strength caught him off guard, and he realized his attempts to reason with her were futile. In a desperate move, he twisted his body, hoping to break free. Suddenly, Zia stumbled backward, her hands slamming against a control panel. Alarms blared throughout the ship, and Craig felt a sudden lurch as the vessel broke orbit. Through the viewport, he watched in horror as Earth rapidly shrank into the distance. "No!" Craig shouted, but his voice was drowned out by the cacophony of alarms and the hum of engines straining at full power. Zia stood frozen, her eyes wide with a mix of confusion and primal hunger. Craig seized the moment of her distraction to bolt from the lab, his mind racing. As he sprinted down the corridor, he noticed other Kobali crew members exhibiting similar signs of instability. Some paced erratically, while others huddled in corners, trembling and muttering incomprehensibly. The realization hit Craig like a punch to the gut. The human pheromones and mating behaviors they'd been studying were having an unprecedented effect on Kobali biology. The entire crew was at risk of losing control. Craig's scientific mind kicked into overdrive as he ran, analyzing the situation. The Kobali's exposure to human mating practices must have triggered some kind of neurochemical cascade, disrupting their normal cognitive functions. But why weren't all of them affected equally? He skidded to a halt as he reached the ship's command center. Taking a deep breath, he pressed the door release, praying he wouldn't find chaos on the other side. To his surprise, he found a single Kobali male standing calmly at the helm, his posture rigid and focused. Unlike the female crew members, this alien appeared unaffected by the human influence. "You must be the human, Craig Morgan," the Kobali said, turning to face him. I am Captain Zorn. Craig nodded, panting. Captain, we have an emergency. Your crew— I am aware of the situation, Zorn interrupted, his voice steady. Explain what you know. Quickly, Craig detailed the unexpected reactions of the Kabali females to human mating practices. He described Zia's deteriorating mental state and the accidental activation of the ship's emergency protocols. Zorn's expression remained impassive, but Craig noticed a flicker of concern in his alien eyes. Without hesitation, the captain activated the ship-wide communication system. Attention all crew! Zorn's voice boomed throughout the vessel. This is Captain Zorn. We are initiating emergency containment procedures. All affected personnel are to report to their assigned stasis pods immediately. Turning to Craig, Zorn gestured to a nearby console. Your assistance would be appreciated, Dr. Morgan. We must secure the ship and its crew before the situation deteriorates further. Together, they worked to coordinate the containment efforts. Craig watched the ship's internal sensors as one by one, the affected Kabali entered their stasis pods. Some went willingly, while others had to be coaxed or gently restrained by the few unaffected crew members. As they worked, Craig noticed the stars streaking by at an alarming rate on the main view screen. Captain, he said, his voice tight with concern, how far have we traveled? Zorn's fingers danced over the controls, pulling up a star chart. The navigation systems were compromised during the initial incident. We are currently traveling through an uncharted region of space, far beyond your solar system. Craig's stomach dropped at the news. He was farther from home than any human had ever been, trapped on a ship with an unstable alien crew. The weight of the situation threatened to overwhelm him, but he forced himself to focus on the task at hand. As he assisted in monitoring the containment process, Craig noticed an alert flashing on a nearby terminal. Curious, he tapped the screen, bringing up a file from the ship's database. His eyes widened as he read the classified information. The Kabali reproductive crisis was far more severe than they had initially revealed. Their entire species teetered on the brink of extinction, their traditional methods of reproduction rendered ineffective by a devastating genetic mutation. Suddenly, the true purpose of the human-Kabali scientific exchange became clear. It wasn't just an opportunity for cultural and biological study. It was a desperate attempt to find a solution to save their dying race. Craig's mind raced with the implications. The extreme reactions of the female Kabali to human mating practices might hold the key to reversing their species' infertility. What had seemed like a disaster could potentially be the breakthrough they needed. He was about to share his discovery with Captain Zorn when a new alarm sounded. The captain's hands flew over the controls, his expression grim. Long-range sensors have detected an approaching Kabali rescue fleet, Zorn announced, his voice tight with tension. Craig frowned. Isn't that good news? They can help us. Zorn turned to face him, his alien features set in a grave expression. You don't understand, Dr. Morgan. If they discover the condition of our crew, they may decide to terminate the entire mission and everyone on board to prevent the spread of the human influence to the rest of our civilization. The implications of Zorn's words hit Craig like a physical blow. He glanced at the approaching fleet on the console, then back at the captain. What can we do? Zorn's eyes narrowed with tenacity. We must find a way to control and channel the effects of human mating behaviors on Kabali biology before the fleet arrives. The fate of my species may depend on it. Craig nodded, his mind already working on potential solutions. As he turned back to the console, he realized that his actions in the coming hours would not only determine his own fate, but potentially the survival of an entire alien race. The pressure was immense, but he had no choice but to rise to the challenge. With renewed focus, Craig began to analyze the data from the experiments, searching for patterns and clues that might lead to a breakthrough. The clock was ticking, and the approaching Kabali fleet loomed ever closer on the long-range sensors. Craig's fingers flew across the console, his mind racing as he processed the implications of the classified information he'd discovered. He turned to Captain Zorn, his voice urgent. Captain, I think I've found something crucial about the Kabali reproductive crisis. Before he could elaborate, the alarm signaling the approaching Kabali rescue fleet blared again, more insistent this time. Zorn's expression hardened as he assessed their options. We're out of time, the captain declared. Dr. Morgan, We need to act now. Your expertise might be our only hope. Craig nodded, his heart pounding. I have an idea, but it's risky. We need to wake Zia from stasis. Zorn's alien features contorted in surprise. Are you certain? Her condition was highly unstable. Her unique reaction to human mating practices could be the key, Craig explained. If we can harness it, we might save your species. The captain hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Very well, let's proceed. They hurried to the stasis bay, where Zia lay suspended in a translucent pod. As they initiated the revival process, Craig held his breath, uncertain of what to expect. The pod hissed open, and Zia's eyes fluttered. She sat up slowly, her gaze immediately locking onto Craig. Her pupils dilated, but her demeanor seemed more controlled than before. Craig, she breathed, her voice husky. What's happening? He quickly explained the situation as they helped her to her feet. Zia's scientific curiosity seemed to override her intense attraction, at least for the moment. A secure laboratory, she suggested. We need to conduct further experiments immediately. The trio rushed to a nearby lab, sealing themselves inside. As they worked, Craig couldn't help but notice the way Zia's body seemed to gravitate towards him, her movements fluid and purposeful. Hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. They analyzed Zia's genetic structure, comparing it to her pre-exposure state. Craig's eyes widened as he noticed a significant change. Look at this, he called out, pointing to a display. Zia's exposure to human pheromones has triggered a dormant gene in her Kabali DNA. I think it might be restoring your species' ability to reproduce. Zia leaned in close, her breath warm on Craig's neck as she studied the data. Fascinating, she murmured, but the process is unstable. We need to refine it. Captain Zorn joined them, his expression a mix of hope and concern. Can we replicate this effect in others? Craig ran his hand through his hair, thinking rapidly. Maybe, if we could create a serum based on my genetic material, we might be able to activate this gene in other Kabali without causing mental instability. They set to work immediately, racing against the clock as the rescue fleet drew ever closer. Craig felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him as he realized his DNA might hold the key to saving an entire alien race. As they neared a breakthrough, the ship's communication system crackled to life. A stern voice filled the laboratory. Research vessel, this is Admiral Krell of the Kabali Rescue Fleet. Prepare for immediate docking and inspection. Captain Zorn's face paled. He activated the ship's comm system, his voice steady despite the tension. Admiral Krell, this is Captain Zorn. We may require additional time to prepare for docking. Our systems are unstable. Craig could hear the skepticism in Admiral Krell's voice as he responded. Explain the nature of these instabilities, Captain. Our scans show no major malfunctions. As Zorn struggled to fabricate a plausible explanation, Craig's mind raced. They needed more time to prove their serum worked, or they risked losing everything. Suddenly an idea struck him. He turned to Zorn and Zia, his voice low and urgent. We need to test the serum now, on a small group of female Kabali crew members. Zia's eyes widened. That's incredibly risky, Craig. We haven't had time to run proper trials. It's our only chance, Craig insisted. If we can show results, maybe the fleet will give us the time we need. Captain Zorn hesitated, then nodded grimly. Agreed, I'll select 5 volunteers from the crew. Let's pray this works. As Zorn left to gather the volunteers, Craig and Zia hurriedly prepared doses of the serum. Craig's hands shook slightly as he filled the last vial, acutely aware of the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. Zia placed a comforting hand on his arm, her touch sending a jolt of electricity through him. Whatever happens, she said softly, know that you've given us hope, Craig. That's more than we had before. The laboratory door slid open, and Captain Zorn returned with 5 female Kabali crew members. Their eyes were clear, but Craig could see the underlying tension in their postures. As Craig and Zia administered the serum, the air in the lab grew thick with anticipation. Minutes ticked by, feeling like hours as they monitored the volunteers' vital signs and genetic markers. Suddenly, one of the Kabali females gasped. Her body shuddered, and her skin took on a luminous quality. The others soon followed, each undergoing a visible transformation. Craig held his breath as he analyzed the data streaming across his console. His eyes widened in disbelief. "It's working," he whispered, then louder. "It's working! Their reproductive systems are reactivating!" The lab erupted in a flurry of activity as they confirmed the results. The volunteers showed clear signs of restored fertility without the extreme mental effects they'd feared. But as Craig moved among them, taking final readings, he noticed something unexpected. Each of the female Kobali was watching him intently, their gazes filled with unmistakable attraction. Before he could process this development, the ship shuddered violently. Admiral Krell's voice boomed through the comm system. "Captain Zorn, we are initiating forced docking procedures. Prepare to be boarded." Craig, Zia, and Captain Zorn exchanged tense glances. They had results, but would it be enough? As the sound of docking clamps echoed through the ship, they braced themselves for the confrontation to come. "Come!" The tension in the laboratory was palpable as the sound of the docking clamps echoed through the ship. Captain Zorn's eyes darted between Craig, Zia, and the 5 female volunteers. His expression hardened with tenacity as he made a split-second decision. "Everyone, follow me," he ordered, his voice low and urgent. "We need to hide you immediately." Without hesitation, the group followed Zorn through a series of winding corridors. The captain's fingers flew across a hidden panel, revealing a concealed entrance to a secure, shielded compartment. "Inside, quickly," Zorn urged, ushering them into the hidden space. "This area is designed to be undetectable. Stay here and continue your work. I'll handle the rescue team." As the door sealed shut behind them, Craig and Zia exchanged worried glances. They could hear the muffled sounds of the rescue team boarding the ship. In the main docking bay, Captain Zorn straightened his uniform and took a deep breath. As the airlock hissed open, he schooled his features into a mask of calm professionalism. "Admiral Krell," Zorn greeted the stern-faced Kobali leader who strode onto the ship. "I apologize for the delay. We experienced a minor systems malfunction that caused our erratic flight path." Krell's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "A malfunction, you say? Our scans showed no major issues." "It was an intermittent problem with our navigation systems," Zorn explained smoothly. "We've managed to stabilize it for now, but I'd welcome your engineers' expertise in ensuring it doesn't recur." As Zorn led the rescue team on a carefully orchestrated tour of the ship, Craig and Zia worked feverishly in the hidden laboratory. The 5 female volunteers watched with a mix of curiosity and apprehension as the humans analyzed data and refined the serum. "Look at this," Zia whispered, pointing to a display. "The volunteers' genetic structure is stabilizing, but there's something else happening." Craig leaned in, his eyes widening as he studied the results. "Their bodies are adapting to prolonged exposure to my pheromones. It's not just restoring fertility, it's changing their physiology." One of the volunteers, a petite Kobali named Lyra, stepped forward. "Is that why I feel different?" she asked, flexing her fingers experimentally. Craig nodded, his mind racing with the implications. "Your bodies are becoming more compatible with human physiology. It's an unexpected side effect, but it might be the key to long-term stability." As they continued their research, Captain Zorn found himself in an increasingly precarious position. Admiral Krell's team had noticed the empty stasis pods and were demanding answers. "Where is the rest of your crew, Captain?" Krell asked, his voice sharp with suspicion. Zorn maintained his composure as he fabricated a response. "We encountered an airborne contaminant that affected several crew members. I was forced to quarantine them for their safety and ours." Krell's eyes narrowed. "I want to see this contamination zone immediately." In the hidden lab, Craig and Zia overheard the exchange through the ship's internal communication system. They exchanged worried glances, realizing their time was running out. "We need more time," Zia said, her voice tight with frustration. "We're so close to a breakthrough." Craig's eyes darted around the lab, landing on a canister of sedative gas used in their medical bay. An idea formed in his mind. What if we buy ourselves that time? He quickly explained his plan to release a mild sedative gas throughout the ship. It was risky, but it might give them the opportunity they needed to complete their research. Sheena hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Do it." With trembling fingers, Craig activated the ship's environmental controls, releasing the sedative gas into the ventilation system. They watched anxiously on the internal sensors as, one by one, the rescue team members began to sway and collapse. "It worked," Craig breathed, relief washing over him. But their victory was short-lived. As they emerged from hiding, they found Captain Zorn and the unaffected Kobali crew members, also unconscious, affected by the gas. The group gathered in the ship's main control room, the weight of their actions pressing down on them. Craig looked at the faces around him, Zaya, the 5 volunteers, and the unconscious forms of the rescue team. "We have to make a decision," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Do we continue our research in secret, or do we reveal the truth to the Kobali authorities?" As they debated the ethical implications of their actions, weighing the potential salvation of the Kobali species against the risks of further experimentation, Lyra suddenly gasped. Her body began to change rapidly, her features becoming more human-like by the second. "What's happening to me?" she cried, staring at her transforming hands in a mix of wonder and fear. Craig rushed to her side, scanning her with a medical tricorder. "The changes are accelerating in your body," he explained, his voice a mix of concern and scientific fascination. "You're adapting faster than the others." The group watched in awe as Lyra's transformation continued, her body becoming a bridge between Kobali and human physiology. This unexpected development forced them to confront the full extent of their experiment's impact. As they grappled with this new reality, Craig's mind raced with possibilities. He turned to the others, his eyes alight with commitment. "We can't keep this hidden," he declared. "The entire Kobali civilization needs to know about our discovery." He quickly outlined his plan to use the ship's advanced communication array to broadcast their findings. It was a bold move, one that would prevent the authorities from suppressing the information and give hope to their species. As they prepared for the broadcast, alarms blared throughout the ship. The sedative gas was wearing off, and the rescue team was beginning to stir. Sia sprang into action, her scientific mind quickly formulating a strategy. "We need to hold them off," she said, directing the volunteers to position themselves strategically throughout the ship. She turned to Lyra, whose transformation had stabilized into a striking blend of Kobali and human features. "Lyra, you go with Craig to the communication array. Your enhanced abilities might be crucial if you encounter resistance." Craig and Lyra nodded, purpose etched on their faces. As they raced through the ship's corridors, they could hear the groans of the awakening Kobali echoing behind them. Reaching the communication center, they found themselves face-to-face with a group of groggy but alert rescue team members. Lyra stepped forward, her new physiology granting her enhanced strength and agility. "Go," she told Craig, her eyes fixed on the approaching Kobali. "I'll hold them off." Craig didn't waste a second. He hurried to the main console, his fingers flying over the controls as he prepared to broadcast their findings to the entire Kobali civilization. Just as he was about to initiate the transmission, the door burst open. Captain Zorn stood in the entrance, his expression unreadable. Craig's finger hovered over the broadcast button, his heart pounding in his chest. The fate of the Kobali species hung in the balance as he waited for Zorn's reaction, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife. For a heartbeat that seemed to stretch into eternity, the room was frozen in a tableau of tension. Then Captain Zorn's eyes flickered from Craig to the console and back again. His brow furrowed, his fists tight, and in that instant, Craig saw the weight of generations of Kobali struggle etched across the captain's face. With a barely perceptible nod, Zorn made his decision. Craig's finger descended on the button, initiating the broadcast. The console hummed to life, streams of data flashing across the screen as their research findings began transmitting to the entire Kobali civilization. "It's done," Craig breathed, a mixture of relief and apprehension washing over him. But their victory was short-lived. As the data streamed outward, the ship's systems suddenly sputtered and sparked. Alarms blared, and the lights flickered ominously. "What's happening?" Lyra cried, her newly transformed features contorting with worry. Before Craig could respond, the transmission cut off abruptly, the console going dark. He frantically tried to restart the broadcast, but the system remained unresponsive. No, he muttered, fingers flying over the dead controls. We didn't get it all out. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor, growing louder by the second. Craig turned to see the rescue team, now fully awake and alert, storming into the communications center. Their faces were masks of fury and suspicion. "Restrain them!" barked Admiral Krell, his eyes blazing with anger as he entered the room. In a flurry of motion, Craig, Lyra, and Captain Zorn found themselves surrounded, their arms roughly pulled behind their backs. Craig winced as cold metal cuffs snapped around his wrists. "Admiral, please," Zorn began, but Krell cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Silence, traitor," the Admiral spat. "You'll all answer for this unauthorized experimentation and the assault on my team." As they were marched out of the communications center, Craig caught a glimpse of Zia being led away by another group of guards. Their eyes met briefly, a silent exchange of worry and tenacity passing between them. The ship's intercom crackled to life, and a stern voice filled the air. "This is Kobali High Command. We've received a partial transmission of great interest. All personnel are ordered to return to the homeworld immediately for a full investigation." Craig's heart sank. They had been so close to revealing the truth to everyone, but now their fate, and the fate of their research, lay in the hands of the Kobali authorities. The journey back to the Kobali homeworld was tense and silent. Craig and his allies were kept in separate holding cells, unable to communicate or continue their work. Through the small window in his cell door, Craig watched as the familiar stars gave way to the swirling atmosphere of the Kobali planet. As they disembarked, Craig was struck by the sheer scale of the Kobali capital. Towering structures of gleaming metal and pulsing energy stretched as far as the eye could see. But he had little time to take in the sights before being ushered into a heavily guarded transport vehicle. The vehicle wound its way through the bustling city, finally arriving at a massive complex surrounded by high walls and energy barriers. Craig realized with a start that this must be the high-security research facility he'd heard whispered about during his time with the Kobali. Inside, he was separated from Captain Zorn and led down a series of sterile, white corridors. The air hummed with the sound of advanced machinery and the murmur of voices speaking in hushed tones. Craig was brought to a stark examination room where a team of Kobali scientists waited. Their eyes gleamed with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion as they regarded him. "Begin the examination," ordered the lead scientist, a tall, severe-looking Kobali with piercing silver eyes. What followed was hours of intensive questioning and invasive medical procedures. Craig gritted his teeth as they extracted samples of his blood, skin, and other tissues. He answered their rapid-fire questions as best he could, trying to emphasize the potential benefits of their research for the Kobali people. As the examination wore on, Craig became acutely aware of the scientist's growing fascination with his physiology. He overheard fragments of their excited conversations, phrases like unprecedented compatibility and potential for replication, sending a chill down his spine. In a moment of respite between tests, Craig asked about Zia and the volunteers. The scientists exchanged glances before one of them replied curtly, "They are undergoing their own evaluations. That's all you need to know." Days blurred together as the testing continued. Craig's worry for Zia and the others gnawed at him constantly. He caught occasional glimpses of them being led to different parts of the facility, but they were always kept carefully separated. One morning, as Craig was being escorted to yet another round of tests, he overheard two scientists discussing their latest findings. "The adaptations in Subject Lyra are remarkable," one said in a hushed tone. "If we can replicate that accelerated process—" "Quiet," the other hissed, noticing Craig's attention. "The human doesn't need to know about that." Craig's mind raced. What were they doing to Lyra? And what did they have planned for him and the others? As he was ushered into the examination room, Craig noticed a new face among the scientists. This Kobali was younger than the others, with a softer expression that stood out among the stern faces he'd grown accustomed to. The young scientist approached Craig, a datapad in hand. "I'm Vex," he said quietly. "I'll be assisting with today's tests." As Vex worked, he spoke in a low voice, his words carefully measured. "Your partial transmission has caused quite a stir among our people. There are debates happening. Not everyone agrees on what should be done." Craig's pulse quickened. This was the first real information he'd received about the outside world since their arrival. He opened his mouth to ask for more details, but Vex shook his head almost imperceptibly, warning him to stay silent. As the test concluded and Craig was led back to his cell, his mind whirled with new possibilities. The Kobali weren't united in their response to the human hybrid solution. There were factions, debates, and where there was division, there might be opportunity. Lying on his narrow bunk that night, Craig began to formulate a plan. Somehow, he had to find a way to reunite with Zia and the volunteers. They needed to make direct contact with the Kobali leaders who supported their research. But as he drifted off into an uneasy sleep, Craig couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Somewhere in the vast complex around him, Kobali scientists were unlocking the secrets of his DNA, pushing forward with their own agenda. And beyond the walls of the research facility, unbeknownst to Craig, a human diplomatic team was already en route to the Kobali homeworld, adding yet another volatile element to an already precarious situation. As Craig lay in his cell, mulling over the possibilities Vex's information had presented, a sudden commotion in the corridor jolted him from his thoughts. The door to his cell slid open, revealing Vex's anxious face. "Quickly!" the young scientist whispered, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "We don't have much time." Craig didn't hesitate. He sprang from his bunk and followed Vex into the dimly lit hallway. The junior scientist pressed a data pad into Craig's hands. "This contains the facility's layout and access codes. You'll need them to get out of here." Heart pounding, Craig studied the schematics, committing key details to memory. "What about the others?" he asked urgently. Vex pointed to a section of the map. "Your companions are being held in this wing, but be careful. Security is tight." With a grateful nod, Craig set off through the maze-like corridors of the research facility. He moved swiftly but cautiously, using Vex's access codes to bypass security checkpoints. Each successful breach brought him closer to his goal, but also increased the risk of detection. As he approached the wing where Zia and the volunteers were held, Craig heard the unmistakable sound of approaching guards. He ducked into an alcove, holding his breath as the patrol passed by. Once the coast was clear, he sprinted the final distance to the detention area. Using the last of Vex's codes, Craig unlocked the cells. Zia emerged first, her eyes wide with surprise and relief. "Craig, how did you—" "No time to explain," he cut her off, ushering the rest of the volunteers out. "We need to move." As the group made their way through the facility, Craig couldn't help but stare at Lyra. Her transformation had progressed even further, her body now a striking blend of Kobali and human features. She moved with a grace and strength that surpassed both species. Their escape didn't go unnoticed for long. Alarms blared throughout the complex, and the sound of running footsteps echoed from multiple directions. "This way!" Craig shouted, leading them down a side passage according to the facility map. They rounded a corner and came face to face with a squad of Kobali security forces. Without hesitation, Lyra sprang into action. She moved with blinding speed, disarming 2 guards before they could even raise their weapons. The rest of the group joined the fray, using their newfound strength to overcome the remaining security personnel. As they fought their way through the facility, Craig realized with growing dread that they were being herded into a trap. The security forces were too well coordinated, closing off escape routes one by one. "We're running out of options," Zia panted as they backed into a sealed section of the facility. Craig frantically scanned the area, looking for any possible way out. His eyes landed on an air vent near the ceiling. "Lyra," he called, "can you get that open?" The hybrid female nodded, her enhanced muscles tensing as she leaped up and grabbed the vent cover. With a grunt of effort, she wrenched it free, creating an opening just large enough for them to squeeze through. "Everyone in!" Craig ordered, helping the others climb into the ventilation shaft. He scrambled in last, pulling the vent cover back into place, just as another wave of security forces rounded the corner. As they crawled through the cramped space, Craig's mind raced. They needed a new plan. Escape alone wouldn't be enough. They had to find a way to make their case heard, to prove the value of their research. Suddenly, he heard voices echoing through the vent shaft. He signaled for the group to stop and listen. "Human delegation has just arrived," a Kobali voice was saying. "They're being taken to the diplomatic reception area now." Craig's pulse quickened. This could be their chance. He turned to the others, his eyes gleaming with drive. "Change of plans," he whispered. "We're going to crash a diplomatic reception." As they altered their course through the ventilation system, Craig explained what he'd overheard. The presence of a human delegation could be the key to getting their research taken seriously by both species. Their progress through the vents was slow and arduous. The tight space made movement difficult, and they had to pause frequently to avoid detection by patrols passing below. Craig could feel the tension mounting with each passing minute. Suddenly, a high-pitched whine filled the air, accompanied by a mechanical buzzing. Craig peered through a vent grate and saw a swarm of small, drone-like devices zipping through the corridors. "They're using some kind of human detecting sensors," Zia whispered, her scientific mind quickly analyzing the threat. "We need to move faster." The group picked up their pace, ignoring the scrapes and bruises from the rough metal as they crawled desperately towards their goal. The sound of the drones grew closer, their whine becoming more insistent as they homed in on the human biosignatures. Just as Craig thought they couldn't go any further, they reached a sealed barrier in the ventilation shaft. Beyond it, he could hear the muffled sounds of the diplomatic reception. "We're out of time," he hissed, the drones now visible at the far end of the shaft. "Zia, can you bypass this seal?" Zia examined the barrier, her fingers dancing over a nearby control panel. "I think so, but it'll take a few minutes." "We don't have a few minutes," Craig replied, watching the drones draw nearer. Lyra moved forward, her hybrid physiology allowing her to squeeze past the others in the tight space. "Let me try," she said, placing her hands on the barrier. To Craig's amazement, Lyra's body seemed to resonate with the Kobali technology. Energy crackled around her fingers, and with a sudden surge, the barrier overloaded and fell away. Without hesitation, Craig led the charge into the diplomatic chamber. They burst into the room in a shower of sparks and debris, interrupting the tense meeting between human and Kobali officials. For a moment, everything froze. Craig took in the scene, the shocked faces of the human delegation, the mix of outrage and fascination on the Kobali leaders' faces, and the security forces reaching for their weapons. In that split second before chaos erupted, Craig knew that everything hinged on what he said next. The fate of two species balanced on a knife's edge, and he had one chance to tip the scales in their favor. Drawing a deep breath, Craig stepped forward, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Leaders of Earth and Kobali, I apologize for this unorthodox entrance, but we bring critical information that affects the future of both our species." Before anyone could react, a high-pitched whine filled the air. Dozens of small, drone-like devices swarmed into the room, their sensors locked onto the human biosignatures. Craig's mind raced. They needed to act fast to prevent chaos from erupting. He glanced at Lyra, an idea forming. "Lyra, can you interface with those drones?" The hybrid's eyes widened in understanding. She stepped forward, raising her hands. Energy crackled around her fingers as she focused on the swarm of devices. The drone's erratic movement slowed, then stopped entirely, hovering harmlessly in the air. Sia seized the moment of relative calm. "We've made significant progress in human Kobali hybridization. Our research could be the key to solving the Kobali fertility crisis." The room erupted into a cacophony of voices. Kobali officials argued amongst themselves, while the human delegation looked on in shock and confusion. Ambassador Chen, recovering his composure, addressed Craig. "What exactly are you proposing?" Craig took a deep breath, knowing his next words could shape the future of two species. "We need a neutral ground to continue our research and negotiations. Ambassador, can you contact the human ship in orbit? We need an emergency deployment of a mobile research station." Chen hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He turned to his aides, speaking in rapid, hushed tones. Captain Zorn, the Kobali military leader, stepped forward. His eyes narrowed as he studied Craig and his companions. "And why should we trust you? You violated our security protocols and disrupted official diplomatic proceedings." Craig met the captain's gaze steadily. "Because the potential salvation of the Kobali species is at stake. Our research is too important to be derailed by internal conflicts or misunderstandings between our peoples." Sheets joined Craig, her voice calm but urgent. we're proposing a temporary ceasefire between all Kobali factions. Give us time to prove the viability of our work." Tense minutes passed as Zorn conferred with other Kobali officials. Finally, he turned back to Craig. "Very well. We will agree to a temporary truce pending the results of your research." As if on cue, Ambassador Chen's aide approached. "Sir, the human ship confirms they can deploy a mobile research station. ETA is 30 minutes. The next half hour was a flurry of activity. Security forces were stood down, and Craig's team was given a chance to explain their situation fully. As they spoke, Craig could see the mix of fascination and apprehension on the faces of both human and Kobali officials. A low rumble announced the arrival of the mobile research station. Through the chamber's windows, Craig watched as the marvel of human engineering descended from the sky, landing in a clearing near the diplomatic complex. "Impressive," murmured Captain Zorn, a hint of grudging admiration in his voice. As the station deployed, rapidly expanding into a self-contained research environment, Craig turned to the assembled leaders. "We need a select team of human and Kobali scientists to relocate to the station immediately. Every moment counts." To Craig's surprise, the young Kobali scientist who had aided his escape stepped forward. "I volunteer," he said, his voice steady despite the shocked looks from his superiors. "Vex," Craig nodded, relief flooding through him. "We'll need your expertise." Within the hour, Craig, Zia, Lyra, Vex, and a handful of other scientists from both species were settled into the mobile research station. The facility hummed with energy as they set to work, determined to replicate and refine the human-Kobali hybridization process. Days blurred together in a haze of intense scientific activity. Craig barely slept, pushing himself to the limit as they chased one breakthrough after another. He watched in awe as Lyra's unique physiology provided critical insights, her body a living testament to the potential of their work. On the fourth day, as Craig pored over the latest test results, Shia burst into the lab, her eyes shining with excitement. "Craig, we've done it. We found a way to fine-tune the hybridization process. We can preserve key Kobali physiological traits while incorporating beneficial human attributes." The implications of this discovery sent a jolt through the research team. It wasn't just a scientific breakthrough, it was a potential lifeline for an entire species. As word of their progress spread, Craig could sense a shift in the atmosphere outside the research station. The initial hostility from conservative Kobali factions began to soften, replaced by a cautious optimism. Ambassador Chen and Captain Zorn took charge of the delicate negotiations, proposing a controlled, voluntary hybridization program. Their plan aimed to address the Kobali fertility crisis while respecting individual choice and cultural preservation. Yet even as hope grew, new complications arose. Craig couldn't help but notice the growing closeness between himself and Zia. Their shared experiences and the intensity of their work had forged a bond that went beyond mere collegiality. He found himself stealing glances at her across the lab, his heart racing when their eyes met. But there was no time to explore these feelings. Outside the bubble of their research station, tensions on the Kobali homeworld were reaching a boiling point. Reports of protests against the hybridization research filtered in, some threatening to turn violent. As Craig prepared to brief the human and Kobali leaders on their latest findings, an urgent message flashed across his terminal. His blood ran cold as he read the directive from Earth, an immediate halt to all experiments, pending review by an international ethics committee. He looked up, meeting Sia's worried gaze across the room. They both knew that this order could derail everything they had worked for. The fate of the Kobali species hung in the balance, and now they faced a terrible choice: obey their government's orders or continue their potentially species-saving research in defiance of Earth's directive. Before Craig could voice his concerns, alarms blared throughout the station. Captain Zorn's voice came over the intercom, tense and urgent. "We've intercepted communications suggesting imminent human military intervention. All personnel, prepare for emergency protocols." The research station erupted into chaos. Human scientists argued with their Kobali counterparts, trust evaporating in the face of this new threat. Craig watched as months of careful diplomacy and scientific cooperation teetered on the brink of collapse. In that moment, as panic threatened to overwhelm him, Craig felt a strange calm descend. He knew that the next few hours would determine not just the outcome of their research, but the future of human-Kobali relations and the fate of an entire species. Taking a deep breath, he began to formulate a plan. It was risky, possibly even dangerous, but it might be their only chance to salvage the situation. As he looked around at the faces of his team, human, Kobali, and hybrid alike, Craig steeled himself for what was to come. "Listen up, everyone," he called out, his voice cutting through the din. "I have an idea, but I'm going to need all of you. It's time to take a stand." "Stand together," Craig said, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. "I have a proposal that might save our work and prevent further conflict." As the alarms continued to blare, Craig quickly outlined his plan to the assembled team. He suggested moving their research to a neutral space station orbiting the Kobali homeworld, where they could continue their work under careful supervision from both human and Kobali authorities. Xia's eyes lit up with understanding. "It's brilliant, Craig. A compromise that addresses Earth's concerns while allowing us to continue our research." Captain Zorn, who had entered the room during the commotion, nodded grimly. "It's a risk, but one worth taking. I'll present your proposal to the Kobali leadership immediately." Over the next few hours, as tensions simmered on the planet below, Craig and his team worked tirelessly to negotiate with both Earth and Kobali officials. The debate was intense, with hardliners on both sides pushing for more extreme measures. But ultimately, the potential benefits of the hybridization research outweighed the risks. 3 days later, Craig found himself aboard a shuttle ascending towards the newly christened space station, Unity. As they approached, he could see the massive structure gleaming against the backdrop of the Kobali homeworld. The station was a marvel of joint human-Kobali engineering, its design a blend of both species' technologies. Lyra pressed her face against the viewport, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's beautiful," she whispered. As they docked, Craig felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. The station represented hope, but he knew the challenges ahead would be formidable. The first weeks on Unity were a whirlwind of activity. Craig and Xia worked around the clock to set up their new lab, while Lyra assisted in integrating the human and Kobali systems. The station buzzed with energy as scientists from both species collaborated, their shared purpose bridging the gap between their worlds. However, their initial attempts at replicating the hybridization process met with frustrating setbacks. Several Kobali volunteers experienced severe physiological reactions, their bodies rejecting the human genetic material. Craig pored over the data, his eyes burning from lack of sleep. "We're missing something," he muttered, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Xia placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "We'll figure it out, Craig. We have to." As they worked, reports from Earth and the Kobali homeworld grew increasingly concerning. Hardline factions on Earth called for a complete withdrawal from Kobali space, while conservative Kobali groups staged violent protests against the hybridization research. Despite the growing turmoil planetside, Unity became a haven for moderate voices from both species. The station received a steady stream of Kobali volunteers and human scientists eager to contribute to the groundbreaking work. One evening, as Craig was reviewing the latest test results, he noticed an anomaly in the data. His heart raced as he double-checked his findings. "Xia!" he called out, his voice echoing through the lab. "I think I've found something." Xia rushed over, her eyes scanning the screen. Craig explained his discovery, a unique combination of human stem cells and a specific Kobali enzyme that could potentially create a stable hybrid embryo. "This could be it," Xia breathed, her eyes shining with excitement. "If we can replicate this process, we might be able to address the Kobali reproductive crisis without direct human genetic material." They worked feverishly to confirm their findings, and within days they had successfully created the first stable hybrid embryo. The news spread quickly through Unity, bringing a renewed sense of hope and purpose to the entire station. However, their celebration was short-lived. As Craig was preparing to present their findings to the Joint Human-Kobali Oversight Committee, alarms blared throughout the station. "Security breach in Sector 7, a voice announced over the intercom. All personnel, initiate lockdown procedures immediately." Craig's blood ran cold as he realized Sector 7 housed their main research labs. He sprinted down the corridor, Xia and Lyra close behind. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a group of armed Kobali extremists. "Stop the abomination!" one of the intruders shouted, raising a weapon. Lyra stepped forward, her hybrid physiology allowing her to move with inhuman speed. She disarmed the lead attacker before he could fire, her movements a blur of efficiency. Craig and Zia took advantage of the distraction, quickly sealing off the corridor to protect their research. As they worked to secure the lab, the sound of fighting echoed through the station. "We need to protect the embryos," Zia said, her voice tight with urgency. "If they're destroyed, we'll lose months of work." Craig nodded, his mind racing. "Lyra, can you hold them off while we transfer the samples to the secure storage unit?" Lyra's eyes gleamed with perseverance. "I'll do my best." As Lyra engaged the attackers, Craig and Zia raced against time to save their research. They carefully transferred the delicate embryos to a reinforced containment unit, acutely aware that the future of both species might rest in their hands. Suddenly, a violent tremor shook the station. Craig stumbled, nearly dropping the containment unit. Alarms blared with renewed urgency. "Warning! Life support systems compromised," an automated voice announced. "Oxygen levels decreasing. Emergency protocols initiated." Craig's heart sank as he realized the extremists had done more than just attack their lab. The entire station was now at risk. As he secured the last of the samples, Craig caught Zia's eye. They both knew that their work was a long way to go. With Unity damaged and under attack, they would have to fight not only to preserve their research, but to survive. The station shuddered again, and Craig could hear the hiss of escaping air from somewhere nearby. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. The next few hours would determine not just the fate of their research, but the lives of everyone aboard Unity and potentially the future of human-Kobali relations. With a nod to Zia, Craig opened the lab door, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The battle for Unity, and the future it represented, had only just begun. Time seemed to slow as Craig assessed their dire situation. The station trembled, metal groaning under the strain of compromised systems. He could feel the change in air pressure, a subtle but undeniable reminder of their dwindling oxygen supply. "We can't leave," Craig declared, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Not when we're so close to a breakthrough." Zia's eyes widened. "Craig, are you suggesting we stay?" He nodded, purpose etched on his face. "We have to secure our research. It's too important to abandon now." Lyra stepped forward, her hybrid physiology allowing her to remain calm in the face of danger. "I agree. We can't let this work go to waste." With a shared look of understanding, the team sprang into action. Craig and Zia rushed to the hybridization chamber, while Lyra interfaced with the station's damaged systems, her enhanced abilities proving invaluable in keeping critical functions online. As alarms blared and emergency lights flashed, Craig and Zia worked frantically to stabilize the new hybrid form. Their hands moved with practiced precision, adjusting parameters and monitoring vital signs. "Oxygen levels at 62% and falling." Lyra's voice echoed through the lab, her tone unnaturally calm. Craig gritted his teeth, forcing himself to focus on the delicate task at hand. "Just a little longer," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Suddenly, a familiar voice crackled over the station's communication system. "Unity Station, this is Captain Zorn. We're initiating emergency docking procedures. Prepare for immediate evacuation." Craig's heart raced. They needed more time. He grabbed the nearest comm unit. "Captain Zorn, this is Craig. We've made a critical breakthrough. We need more time to complete our work." There was a pause, filled only by the hiss of escaping air and the whine of overtaxed machinery. Then Zorn's voice returned. "Understood, Craig. We're extending our ship's shield around Unity. It'll buy you some extra time, but make it quick." Relief washed over Craig. He turned to Zia, who was already recalibrating their equipment. "Let's make this count," he said. For the next few minutes, the lab was a flurry of activity. Craig and Zia worked in perfect sync, their movements a well-choreographed dance of scientific precision. Lyra's voice provided a steady stream of updates on the station's failing systems. As the power began to fluctuate, Craig felt a surge of triumph. "We've done it," he exclaimed. carefully extracting the stable hybrid embryo. Sia, start the documentation process. Lyra, prepare for data transfer. With practiced efficiency, they secured their precious cargo and critical research data. Just as the last of the information was transmitted, the lights in the lab flickered and died. "That's it," Craig called out. "Time to go." They raced through the darkening corridors of Unity, the station groaning around them. As they reached the docking port, they could see the rescue ships waiting, their airlocks open and ready. Craig ushered his team aboard, clutching the container with the hybrid embryo. As the airlock sealed behind them, he caught a final glimpse of Unity through a viewport. The station that had been their home and laboratory was beginning to break apart, a testament to the risks they had taken in pursuit of their groundbreaking research. Once aboard Captain Zorn's ship, Craig and his team immediately set to work, converting a storage bay into a makeshift lab. They needed to ensure the hybrid embryo's survival during their journey. As Craig carefully placed the embryo in a stasis unit, he felt the ship lurch as it moved away from the disintegrating Unity station. A pang of loss struck him, but he pushed it aside. They had achieved something remarkable, something that could change the future for both humans and Kobali. No sooner had they stabilized their makeshift lab than an urgent transmission came through. Craig's blood ran cold as he listened to the report of escalating violence on the Kobali homeworld. The situation was spiraling towards civil war, threatening to undo all their hard work. Craig's mind raced, formulating a plan. He turned to Captain Zorn, who had joined them in the makeshift lab. "Captain, we need to use your ship's communication array. We have to broadcast our findings to the entire Kobali population." Zorn's eyes narrowed as he considered the proposal. "It's risky, but it might be our best shot at quelling the unrest. I'll make it happen." As the rescue fleet approached the Kobali homeworld, Craig, Zia, and Lyra prepared for their broadcast. They compiled their research data, readying visual evidence of their successful hybridization. Just as they were about to begin the transmission, the ship's sensors lit up with new activity. Captain Zorn burst into the lab, his face grave. "We've detected multiple unidentified ships entering the system. They don't match any known designs." Craig's heart sank. They had been so close to resolving the crisis, only to face a new, unknown threat. As the tension in the room mounted, a cryptic message from Kobali High Command flashed across the communication screens, warning of potential danger from a mysterious alien species. In that moment, Craig realized their hybrid embryo might be more crucial than ever before. Its unique genetic makeup could potentially offer insights or even resistance to unknown alien threats. He turned to his team, his voice steady despite the weight of their situation. "We need to accelerate the hybrid development process. It might be our best chance at understanding and defending against whatever's coming our way." As the rescue fleet raced towards an uncertain confrontation, Craig couldn't help but feel the magnitude of what lay ahead. The fate of two civilizations, the future of the Kobali species, and now potentially the safety of both Earth and the Kobali homeworld, rested on their shoulders. With a deep breath, Craig focused on the task at hand. Time was running short, and the decisions they made in the coming hours would shape the future in ways they could scarcely imagine. As the unknown ships drew closer, he steeled himself for the challenges ahead, knowing that the true test of their newfound alliance was about to begin. The tension in the air was palpable as Craig and his team raced against time to secure their groundbreaking research. As they approached the Kobali homeworld, multiple crises converged at once. Captain Zorn's voice crackled over the intercom, his tone urgent. "Unidentified vessels entering the system. All hands, prepare for defensive maneuvers." Craig exchanged a worried glance with Zia. The timing couldn't have been worse. Reports from the planet's surface indicated that civil unrest had reached a critical point, with pro-hybridization and conservative factions engaged in violent clashes across major cities. "We need to split our efforts," Craig said, his mind racing. "I'll focus on accelerating the development of the hybrid embryo. Its unique genetic makeup might provide insights for defending against this unknown threat." Shia nodded, her eyes filled with grit. "I'll prepare to address my people. If we can quell the civil unrest, we'll be in a better position to face whatever's coming." As Craig hurried back to the makeshift lab, the ship shuddered under evasive maneuvers. He carefully placed the hybrid embryo in an advanced incubation chamber, his fingers flying over the controls to optimize its development. Hours passed in a blur of activity. Craig's eyes widened as he observed the embryo's progress on the monitors. "This is unprecedented," he muttered, calling for Lyra to verify his findings. The hybrid embryo was developing at an astonishing rate, reaching a stage equivalent to several weeks of normal gestation in just hours. As Craig analyzed the data, he uncovered remarkable adaptations in the hybrid's physiology, enhanced resilience and adaptability that could prove crucial in facing the approaching alien vessels. Meanwhile, Zia began her broadcast to the Kobali homeworld. Her voice, calm and authoritative, echoed through the ship's communication systems. "My fellow Kobali," she began, "I come to you with evidence of a scientific breakthrough that could secure the future of our species." She presented clear factual data on the successful hybridization process, emphasizing its potential to save them from extinction. Lyra joined the broadcast, her presence a living testament to the benefits of human-Kobali integration. "I stand before you as proof that our two species can coexist and thrive together," she said, her words resonating with many of the more moderate factions. The effect was immediate. Reports from the surface indicated that some groups were ceasing hostilities, calling for peaceful negotiations. However, their moment of hope was short-lived. The ship's alarms blared as the unidentified alien vessels entered Kobali orbit. Captain Zorn's voice cut through the chaos. "Brace for impact! Their ships are massive. They're dwarfing our entire fleet." A transmission from the alien ships crackled through the communication systems. "Attention human and Kobali forces. We are the Zarketh. Your species have been chosen for assimilation to enhance our genetic diversity. Surrender immediately or face annihilation." The threat galvanized the warring Kobali factions. In the face of this external danger, they quickly united, recognizing the need to stand together. Craig, still monitoring the hybrid embryo's development, made a startling discovery. The rapidly maturing neural patterns of the embryo showed an innate ability to decipher and interface with the Zarketh's complex communication systems. "Captain," Craig called over the comm, "the hybrid, it can understand their transmissions. This could give us an edge." Captain Zorn quickly formulated a plan. "We'll use our ships to form a defensive line around the Kobali homeworld. It'll buy you time to develop a strategy using your hybrid research." Ambassador Chen's voice joined the discussion. "Agreed. This is our chance to cement the human-Kobali alliance in the face of a common enemy." As the fleet moved into position, Craig and Zia worked feverishly to weaponize their hybrid research. They theorized that the hybrid's unique genetic structure could be used to create a bioweapon capable of incapacitating the Zarketh without harming humans or Kobali. "The concept is sound," Zia said, reviewing their calculations, "but we'd need direct access to a Zarketh ship to deploy it effectively." Lyra stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with tenacity. "I can do it. My hybrid physiology might allow me to bypass their security systems." Before they could discuss further, the ship rocked violently. The Zarketh had launched their first assault on the combined human-Kobali fleet. "Hull breach on deck 7, an officer shouted. "Shields at 60% and dropping." Captain Zorn's voice was strained but steady. "We're holding, but barely. Whatever you're planning, make it fast." Craig turned to his team, the weight of two civilizations' fates heavy on his shoulders. "Lyra, prepare for your mission. Xia, help me finalize this countermeasure. We've got one shot at this." As alarms blared and the ship shuddered under repeated attacks, Craig and his team raced against time. The hybrid embryo continued its accelerated growth, providing crucial data for their desperate plan. Outside, the vastness of space was alive with weapons fire as the human-Kobali alliance fought to hold the line against the technologically superior Zarketh. The future hung in the balance, with the survival of both species dependent on the success of Craig's hybrid research and Lyra's perilous mission. Craig looked up from his work, his eyes meeting Zia's across the lab. They both knew that the next few hours would determine the fate of their peoples. With renewed focus, they turned back to their tasks, keenly aware that time was running out. Out. With a deep breath, Craig turned to Zia. "It's time. We need to act now." As if in response to his words, the ship rocked violently, nearly throwing them off balance. Captain Zorn's voice crackled over the intercom, urgency evident in his tone. Zarketh forces have breached our outer defenses. We're running out of options. Craig nodded grimly. Lyra, you're up. Are you ready for this? Lyra stood tall, her hybrid features set with persistence. I was born ready. Let's show these Zarketh what we're made of. Without further delay, Lyra made her way to the airlock, equipped with specially designed gear to aid her infiltration. As the airlock cycled, Craig and Zia watched anxiously through the view screen as Lyra's small form darted across the space between their ship and the looming Zarketh mothership. She's in, Zia reported, monitoring Lyra's life signs. Her hybrid physiology is working. The Zarketh systems aren't detecting her as an intruder. Craig allowed himself a moment of relief before refocusing on their task. Now it's our turn. We need to finish this countermeasure. For the next hour, Craig and Zia worked feverishly in the makeshift lab. The hybrid embryo continued its astonishing development, providing crucial data for their bioweapon. Outside, the battle raged on, the combined human-Kobali fleet struggling to hold the line against the technologically superior Zarketh. Suddenly, Lyra's voice came through their comms, slightly distorted but unmistakable. I've reached the central control hub. You won't believe the amount of data here. I'm starting to interface with their systems now. Craig's fingers flew over the controls, making final adjustments to the bioweapon. Great work, Lyra. Keep it up. We're almost there on our end. Just as Craig was about to announce the completion of the bioweapon, a realization struck him. He turned to Sia, his eyes wide. We've overlooked something critical. This weapon needs to be deployed directly into their life support systems. We can't do that from here. Sia's face fell as the implications sank in. Someone needs to take it there personally. Without hesitation, Craig began packing the bioweapon into a specialized containment unit. I'll go. I know this weapon inside and out. I have the best chance of deploying it correctly. Captain Zorn's voice cut through their discussion. Negative, Dr. Whitman. We can't risk losing you. You're too valuable to this mission. With all due respect, Captain, Craig argued, we don't have a choice. Every moment we delay, more lives are lost. I'm going, and that's final. After a tense moment, Zorn relented. Very well. There's a stealth shuttle in Bay 3. It's your best shot at reaching the Zarketh ship undetected. Craig nodded, already moving towards the door. Zia caught his arm, her eyes meeting his. Be careful out there. I will, he promised, then turned and sprinted towards the shuttle bay. Minutes later, Craig found himself piloting the small, sleek craft towards the massive Zarketh mothership. His heart pounded as he navigated through the chaos of the battle, narrowly avoiding debris and weapons fire. Lyra, he called over the comm, I'm approaching your entry point. Guide me in. With Lyra's assistance, Craig managed to dock his shuttle near her location on the Zarketh ship. As he stepped into the alien vessel, he was immediately struck by the otherworldly architecture and pulsing, organic-looking technology. Using the data Lyra had transmitted, Craig began making his way deeper into the ship. He moved cautiously, every sense on high alert. The corridors seemed to shift and change, making navigation a challenge. Suddenly, a group of Zarketh warriors rounded a corner ahead. Craig's breath caught in his throat as he pressed himself against the wall, praying the aliens wouldn't notice him. To his amazement, they passed by without a second glance. Remembering the hybrid physiology research, Craig realized his close proximity to the bioweapon must be altering his biosignature, making him appear as one of them to the ship's sensors. As he continued his perilous journey through the alien ship, Craig received an urgent message from Zia. Craig, the hybrid embryo, it's developed even further. We might be able to create an enhanced version of the bioweapon, one that could neutralize the entire Zarketh fleet at once. Craig's mind raced, weighing the options. Continue with the current plan or return to potentially create a more powerful solution? The fate of both species hung in the balance. Lyra, he called over the comm, change of plans. I need you to prepare the Zarketh systems for bioweapon deployment. I'm heading back to synthesize an enhanced version. As Craig turned to retrace his steps, he found himself face to face with a squad of Zarketh warriors, their alien features contorted in what he could only assume was surprise and anger. In that moment, all of Craig's training and knowledge came into play. He ducked and weaved, using his understanding of Zarketh physiology to anticipate their movements. His human agility gave him an edge in the confined space of the corridor. Heart pounding, muscles screaming, Craig managed to outmaneuver the aliens and break free. He sprinted back towards his shuttle, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind him. Reaching the airlock, Craig threw himself into the shuttle and initiated emergency launch procedures. The small craft shot away from the Zarketh mothership just as energy weapons began to target it. Craig's hands flew over the controls, pushing the shuttle to its limits as he navigated through the debris-filled battlefield. The Zarketh weapons fire intensified, creating a deadly gauntlet he had to traverse to reach safety. As he approached Captain Zorn's ship, a transmission came through. The Zarketh had begun their final attack on the Kabali homeworld. Massive energy signatures lit up the sensors as the alien weapons powered up. Craig gritted his teeth, pushing the failing shuttle even harder. The airlock of Zorn's ship loomed ahead, a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. But between him and safety lay a storm of Zarketh energy beams, each capable of vaporizing his small craft in an instant. With alarms blaring and systems failing around him, Craig made a final, desperate push towards the airlock. The fate of two civilizations rested on his ability to land safely and immediately begin work on the enhanced bioweapon. As he threaded his way through the deadly energy beams, Craig couldn't help but wonder if he'd made the right choice. With a final burst of speed, Craig aimed the shuttle directly at the airlock, bracing for impact. The shuttle slammed into the airlock with a bone-jarring crash, metal screeching against metal. Emergency systems engaged, sealing the breach and stabilizing the pressure. Craig stumbled out of the battered craft, his legs shaky but his willpower unwavering. "Craig!" Zia's voice called out as he entered the lab. "Thank goodness you're alive." He rushed to her side, taking in the sight of the pulsating hybrid embryo. Its accelerated growth had continued, and now it emanated an otherworldly energy that seemed to fill the room. "No time to waste," Craig said, his eyes locked on the embryo. "We need to synthesize the enhanced bioweapon now." They worked in perfect sync, their movements a choreographed dance of scientific precision. Craig's hands flew over the controls, adjusting parameters based on the embryo's rapidly evolving neural patterns. Zia processed the data in real time, her mind racing to keep up with the implications of each new development. The ship shuddered violently, nearly throwing them off balance. Captain Zorn's voice boomed over the intercom, tension evident in every word. "The Zarketh have begun their final attack on the Kabali homeworld. Energy readings are off the charts. They're powering up some kind of planet-destroying weapon." Craig and Zia exchanged a look of unwavering drive. The weight of two civilizations pressed down upon them, spurring them to work even faster. "Almost there," Craig muttered, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Just a few more adjustments." Zia's eyes widened as she processed the latest data stream. "Craig, look at this. The embryo's neural patterns. They're perfectly aligned with the Zarketh communication frequencies." A plan formed in Craig's mind. "We can use that. If we can transmit the bioweapon's genetic code directly to Lyra's neural implant, she can integrate it into the Zarketh systems." They quickly modified a nearby communication array, reconfiguring it to match the unique frequency of Lyra's hybrid physiology. As Craig input the final commands, Zia established a connection with Lyra. "Lyra, can you hear us?" Zia called out, her voice tense. Lyra's response came through, distorted but clear enough to understand. "I'm here. The Zarketh are on to me. I don't have much time." "We're transmitting the enhanced bioweapon to your neural implant now," Craig explained rapidly. "You need to integrate it into their life support systems immediately." They watched the progress bar inch forward, each second feeling like an eternity. Finally, the transmission completed. "Got it," Lyra confirmed. "Beginning integration now." The next few moments were agonizing. Craig and Zia could only wait, helpless, as Lyra worked to deploy their last hope against the Zarketh threat. Suddenly, the ship's sensors lit up. Energy readings from the Zarketh fleet began to fluctuate wildly. "It's working!" Zia exclaimed, her eyes wide as she interpreted the data. "The Zarketh warriors, they're collapsing!" Craig watched in amazement as the massive energy signatures of the Zarketh weapons powered down. The bioweapon had struck with ruthless efficiency, incapacitating the alien threat in a matter of minutes. As the immediate danger passed, Craig and Zia turned their attention back to the hybrid embryo. It had continued its astonishing development and now resembled a fully formed fetus, floating serenely in its containment chamber. "My God," Craig breathed, placing a hand on the chamber's surface. "Do you realize what this means?" Zia nodded, her eyes shining with a mix of wonder and trepidation. "It's the future of both our species, a perfect blend of human and Kobali." Before they could discuss further, Captain Zorn's voice came over the intercom once more. "Dr. Whitman, Dr. Chen, report to the bridge immediately. We have incoming transmissions from Earth and the Kobali homeworld." As they made their way to the bridge, Craig and Zia could feel the shift in the air. The fear and tension of battle had given way to something new, a sense of possibility, of a future neither of them could have imagined when this journey began. They stepped onto the bridge to find it bustling with activity. Holographic displays showed incoming ships from both Earth and the Kobali homeworld, converging on their location. Captain Zorn turned to them, a rare smile on his face. "It seems your hybrid research has caught the attention of both our governments. They're sending delegations to witness the results firsthand." As the delegations began to arrive, Craig and Zia found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of activity. They led groups of awestruck officials to the lab, explaining the intricacies of their research and the miraculous development of the hybrid child. The leaders of both species, faced with the undeniable potential of human Kobali hybridization, quickly agreed to establish a joint research initiative. Plans were drawn up for a new space station that would serve as a neutral ground for continued collaboration. Amidst the excitement, Lyra was brought aboard, her actions having saved both civilizations. As she stepped onto the bridge, humans and Kobali alike broke into applause, hailing her as a hero. Craig watched as Lyra was surrounded by admirers, her unique status as a successful hybrid opening doors that had once seemed firmly shut. He felt a surge of pride, knowing that their work had paved the way for greater acceptance and understanding between the two species. As the initial fervor began to die down, Craig found a moment alone with Zia. They stood before the viewport, gazing out at the stars that suddenly seemed full of new possibilities. "So," Craig said, a hint of a smile playing at his lips, "ready to lead a groundbreaking interspecies research program?" Zia's eyes sparkled with excitement as she nodded. "Absolutely. Though I have to admit, when I first learned about human breeding methods, I never imagined it would lead to this." Craig chuckled, remembering Zia's initial shock and confusion. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" As they stood there contemplating the future that stretched out before them, Craig couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. The hybrid child, safely housed in its advanced incubation chamber, represented more than just a scientific breakthrough. It was a symbol of hope, of two species coming together to create something entirely new. The stars seemed to shine a little brighter as plans for the new space station, already christened Genesis, began to take shape. Craig and Zia knew that their work was nowhere near the end. In many ways, it was just beginning. But as they watched ships from Earth and the Kobali homeworld approach, they felt ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The future, once clouded by the threat of war and misunderstanding, now held the promise of unprecedented cooperation and discovery. And at the heart of it all was a child, born of two worlds, ready to bridge the gap between species and usher in a new era of interstellar relations.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.